Exactly. So this is the penultimate session of the day, well, the ultimate session of the day. If your brains are not already exploded with inspiration, we're going to probably try and do a bit more of that over the next hour or so. So my name's Ed. I'm the co-founder of specialist sustainability agency Futerra. I now brand myself as a futurist because I get better paid gigs because nobody wants to book a sustainability guy. But if you say, hey, I'm the future guy, then you get much more bookings. And Futerra is now 17 years old. I always joke that when I first started working in sustainability, it was a bit like wetting yourself whilst wearing a dark suit. No one noticed, but it gave you a warm feeling inside. Now we say it's like teenage sex. Everyone says they're doing it, very few people actually are, and those that are doing it quite badly. These are old jokes, but I'm an environmentalist, so I recycle them over and over again. So, I'm here to talk about climate change just for 10 minutes or so, and the energy system, and the role of narrative and the story we tell ourselves. So you will be familiar with the lovely winter you've had here in Barcelona with snow on the beach, but there's something quite significant happening here. And if you look, this is the average Arctic temperatures. This is the kind of average over the last 30 years. You can see the fluctuations. This is where we were in February, March. This is a huge fluctuation, 20 degrees centigrade above what it should be at this time of year. So that's sending quite a big warning sign. And plus we've got these kind of things happening, like 5 Category 5 hurricanes, which crossed the Gulf of Mexico last year, causing $306 billion worth of damage. So this is significant stuff. And if you want to see the last Titanic moment, this is Eagle Creek in Washington State. This is a charming gentleman playing golf while a huge forest fire engulfs the world around him. This is not progress. We like to think that the story of progress we tell ourselves, that every generation enjoys a better quality of life than the one that came before them, and that progress is inexorable and inevitable and always goes in one direction. Actually, it's much more like this. We create progress traps, where our pursuit of progress, and in the context of climate change and energy, our pursuit of progress in the form of burning fossil fuels has allowed us to build this incredible world around us, but is now creating the carbon emissions which drive climate change, which, as Mark said at the beginning of the day, have the potential to undermine everything we've ever achieved. So we're creating this perfect progress trap, so you have to do something different. And if you want to see it as starkly as we might want to frame it here, is this idea of unburnable carbon. So actually, this is the global carbon budget, 2 degrees, although the Paris Agreement of 2015 is 1.5 degrees. This is what we can actually burn. This is the global fossil fuel reserves listed as valuable assets on stock exchanges, which we can't burn. So there's 5 times more fossil fuel reserves listed on global stock exchanges than we can actually burn if we want to stay within 2 degrees. And this is an enormous subprime carbon bubble, estimated at $22 trillion worth of asset. Most of your pensions, unless you've screened them for climate risk, are probably embedded in that carbon bubble. So there's something has to change. Even that radical, left-wing, anarchic environmentalist, the governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, has said most fossil fuel reserves can't be burned. Plus, we're killing ourselves with all this stuff. Air pollution already kills 1 in 8 people globally. And as a result of that, the International Monetary Fund has actually calculated that the fossil fuel industry enjoys an indirect subsidy of $5 trillion a year for all that sickness, debilitation, and premature death that results. So clearly something needs to change, which is what Paris at the end of 2015 was all about. And then we had he who shall not be named in the White House, saying that the concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make US manufacturing non-competitive. And he said, I was elected to represent the people of Pittsburgh, not Paris. At which point the mayor of Pittsburgh stood up and said, we stand with Paris, not with you. And the reason that there is a problem here is that the facts don't matter. You know, facts don't care about your feelings. There's all sorts of opinion being held around climate change and this energy transition we're engaged in, but the facts have to come to the fore. If you want the best illustration of this, this is two graphs. This is the solid evidence of global warming. This is ordinary scientific intelligence against acceptance of anthropogenic climate change evidence. As you'd expect, as intelligence goes up, accepting the evidence also goes up. Until you split out political affiliation, and then conservative Republicans, the more scientifically intelligent they are, the more they reject the evidence of climate change. And this is because it's a threat to their identity. It's a threat to the story they tell themselves about the world. They reject the evidence. They reject the facts. And as Ayn Rand, the author of Atlas Shrugged, said, we can evade reality, but we can't evade the consequences of evading reality. So not only are these people in denial of climate change, they're also in denial of the consequences of climate change. And this is actually what we might call the Geschichtsspalt, to throw a nice, easy, simple German word into the mix, or the story gap, the gap between the old story, which is broken and unraveling, and the new story that we need to live by if we're going to deliver the better future. And dogs sniff bottoms, we tell stories. These are the way we make sense of our relationships with each other and the wider world around us. They're the library of humanity. They're the most powerful organizing framework we have, and we have to tell a better story to speed this energy and climate transition. Because, this is from the Financial Times, it's the big green bang that we are living through the early stages of. This is how renewable energy has already become unstoppable. And this is quite predictable. If we go back to the 70s, it's what we might call Swanson's law, which shows that actually the price of solar photovoltaic modules tends to drop 20% for every doubling of cumulative ship volume. For those of you wrestling with what that might mean, it basically means the price halves every 3 years. And we can see that as you've seen the price come down, unsurprisingly, you've seen the number of solar panels installed and the installed megawatts go up. Again, entirely predictable, 500,000 solar panels being installed every day around the world and more. And where this gets fascinating and where it gets really disruptive is when we hit this point here. So this red line is the new natural gas electricity price. The dotted green line is the average solar medium sunlight location price for solar panels. Around about 2019, solar becomes cheaper in Northern Europe than new natural gas. In the UK, in the last auctioning round for new gas-fired power stations, no one bid. None of the companies want to build one of these things because they're going to be too expensive. This is why Elon Musk, with his integrated business, is really on the money. Because when you start to combine electric vehicles for mobility with the ability to have battery storage for the solar energy you generate at home, plus you have roof tiles, which cost the same as conventional roof tiles, but also generate electricity at the same time, then you have total system disruption coming through as potential. And this is what the Australians quaintly call the utility death spiral. This is what happens. Rooftops go solar, so it means the companies sell less power, but they still have massive fixed costs because they've built things like gas-fired power stations, so they have to service the debt on those investments. That means the utilities have to hike the prices to stay affordable, and solar becomes cheaper than the grid, and round we go until those businesses unravel. So the thing we're losing sight of here is the power of exponentials. And if you don't understand exponentials, it's as easy as 1, 2, 4. You just have to appreciate that there is going to be a transformation that we might not get our heads around in the right way. Horror filmmakers know this as the zombie equation. So if we imagine someone in the front row here becomes a zombie, they stand up, and in the first minute, they bite 2 other people in the room who also become zombies. And then in the subsequent minute, those 2 people also go off and bite another 2 people, and so on and so forth. We have time until total zombie would be, this room would be about 6 minutes. Barcelona would be about 20 minutes. The whole of Spain is about 25 minutes. And the entire world is 34 minutes till total zombie. Start running now. And so the same exponential principle applies to solar power. So what is the time until total solar? Well, Ray Kurzweil, Google's futurist, says, installed solar power capacity has doubled 7 times since 2000. If this continues, we will have a totally solar-powered world for electricity in just 12 years' time. Now that's maybe a little bit optimistic, but if you actually compare several of the different surveys in a meta-analysis, what you find is it tends to come out somewhere between 17 and 25 years. It's quick. So we're involved in a generational shift in the way we generate energy. And the reason we don't understand these exponentials is because we tend to think linearly. This is a wonderful amalgamation of different analyses from the World Energy Outlook produced by the International Energy Agency. The colored lines are all the different predictions for growth in solar, and then the black line is what actually happened. So who is misreading that data? All of the lines are practically flat, and then suddenly, actually, reality is delivering something very different. This is why, when he who shall not be named says we're going to dig coal, it shows how foolishly short-sighted this is, both commercially and environmentally, because solar already employs more people in US electricity generation than oil, coal, and gas combined. It's not just solar, it's also wind. The next generation of offshore wind turbines in the North Sea, 10 megawatt turbines, will be as high as the Shard in London, Europe's highest building. So we're seeing this mega trend in scalable renewables, which is what makes things like Hinkley C, the new nuclear power station planned for the UK, look even crazier. Because this will cost £24 billion. It will be the most expensive man-made object on the planet in history. And it will also tie the UK, in a post-Brexit era, into the highest priced energy contracts in the world. So it obviously makes perfect sense why there's a renewables revolution going on. If you want to know what else you could get with that money, the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland cost £4 billion. You could have 6 of those. Or the giant pyramid at Cheops cost about £1 billion. So we can have 24 of them, if you fancied that. Marco also talked about the internet earlier, but this is where the factor of democracy comes in. We are going to have a 100% renewable energy-powered world. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Our challenge is how we draw that date closer towards us, but also how we make it a distributive, regenerative economy, as Kate outlined, where we all become active players participants in a dynamic two-way energy system where we're all both producer and customer. Because otherwise, we'll just be sat at the end of a linear industrial pipe having to pay what the big energy companies tell us we must pay. So 100% renewable energy future can come in 2 forms. It can be democratic or it can be dictatorial. And that's the choice we're facing right now. So everyone says, can you fix the economy and the environment at the same time? I always say, well, if you think you can't, then you have a really tiny mind. We've been inspired all day by people driving innovation and change and actually working out how you reconcile those 2 challenges simultaneously for the best result. And my business partner, Solitaire, my co-founder at Futerra, recently wrote a book called The Happy Hero. And in it, she describes quite nicely the sort of therapeutic journey that humanity is currently on. Because what tends to happen is we start off as normal, and then change speeds up. The awareness of the crisis grows. We keep trying the old solutions, and anxiety builds. And then we reach a crossroads where we have 3 choices. You can either be bad, so you deny the reality. You blame yourselves. You say humanity deserves it. We're so unworthy. You try to survive and ends in disaster. Or you can be blind, so you delay the action, you don't do the things at scale, you protect the vested interests, you try a few sticking plaster solutions, you still get disaster, you just get disaster delayed. Or, what we're all here about and what we're focused on is how do we be bright? How do we think positively in a sense of pragmatic optimism? How do we explore the new things and opportunities that are right in front of us? And how do we enjoy the positives to get that big payoff? That is the huge challenge that is coming. And as William Gibson, the sci-fi writer, said, the reason we're all optimists is because we're constantly exposed to the brilliant people doing brilliant things. Because the future's out there, it's just not evenly distributed yet. We have all the technologies we need, we have all the money we need. The primary blocker here is our consciousness, our narrative, and our ability to define our identity through salvation. And the last slide I will show is actually a study from Stanford University out last year, where they've done the calculation. They said, actually, we can get 100% renewables in 139 countries by 2050. And they've given the detailed breakdown of how that's possible. Yes, there will be jobs lost, 27.7 million, but also 52 million jobs created. As Mark, my Futurist colleague, always says, you know, not doing anything about the future will cost, doing something about the future will cost some people their jobs, not doing something about the future will cost everyone their jobs. So that is our challenge. And Donald the Unready, is a little bit like King Canute, trying to hold back that inexorable tide of change. We are that tide of change. You are that tide of change. Let's get out there and make it happen. Thank you.